The train's whistle pierced the autumn air of Helena, Montana Territory, in 1878, and Nora Hastings felt her stomach clench with a mixture of fear and desperate hope as the locomotive screeched to a halt at the weathered platform. She clutched her worn carpetbag tighter, her knuckles white beneath her thin gloves, and peered through the dusty window at the rough frontier town that was supposed to be her salvation. The correspondence with Edmund Pitchard had promised security, a home, and perhaps even companionship. But as she stepped down onto the wooden platform, the late October wind whipping at her modest traveling dress, she realized she had no idea what Edmund actually looked like. The faded daguerreotype he had sent months ago showed only a dark blur where a face should have been. And now, standing among the chaos of arriving passengers and departing freight, Nora felt utterly alone. Isaac Lancaster watched from across the dusty street, his weathered hat pulled low against the wind as he loaded supplies into his wagon. He had come into town for feed and provisions, the same monthly trip he had made for the past 3 years since settling on his small ranch 15 miles outside Helena. At 32, Isaac had grown accustomed to solitude, even preferred it most days, but something about the young woman on the platform caught his attention. She stood frozen amid the bustle, turning in slow circles as though searching for a familiar face in a sea of strangers. Her dark hair, pinned neatly beneath a modest bonnet, caught the afternoon light, and even from this distance, Isaac could see the anxiety etched into her posture. Nora's heart hammered against her ribs as minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Passengers dispersed, claimed by waiting families or disappearing into the town's establishments. The platform emptied until only she and an elderly porter remained. She approached him with trembling steps, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for Edmund Pitchard. He was supposed to meet me here." The porter, a grizzled man with kind eyes, scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Pitchard, you say? Can't say I know anyone by that name, miss. You might try asking at the general store or the saloon. Folks around here tend to know everyone's business." Isaac noticed the porter gesturing toward town, saw the young woman's shoulders sag with visible disappointment, and something in him stirred. He had always prided himself on minding his own business, on keeping to himself and avoiding the complications that came with getting involved in other people's troubles. But there was something vulnerable and courageous about the way she straightened her spine and picked up her bag, preparing to venture into an unfamiliar town alone. Before he could talk himself out of it, Isaac found his feet carrying him across the street. "Pardon me, miss," he said, removing his hat as he approached. "I couldn't help but overhear. You looking for someone in particular?" Nora turned to face the stranger, and her breath caught slightly. He was tall, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of summer sky. His dark hair curled slightly at the collar, and despite the dust coating his clothes, there was something solid and reassuring about his presence. "Yes, sir. A man named Edmund Pitchard. We've been corresponding, and he was supposed to meet me here today." Isaac frowned, searching his memory. He knew most of the ranchers and townspeople within a 50-mile radius, at least by reputation. "I'm afraid I don't know that name. How long have you been writing to him?" "6 months, Nora replied, her voice growing smaller. "He placed an advertisement back east for a mail-order bride." I answered, "and we've exchanged letters regularly since April. He told me he owned a ranch near Helena and needed a wife to help him build a life here." She paused, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I suppose I should introduce myself. I'm Nora Hastings from Philadelphia." "Isaac Lancaster," he replied, extending his hand. Her grip was firmer than he expected, though her hand trembled slightly in his. "Miss Hastings, I've lived in these parts for 3 years, and I know most folks around here. I've never heard mention of Edmund Pitchard or any ranch by that name." "Did he give you a specific location?" Nora fumbled with her bag, extracting a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. She selected one and unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the neat script. "He said his property was north of town, near the Prickly Pear Creek area. He described a modest house with good grazing land and a small herd of cattle." Isaac's frown deepened. He knew the Prickly Pear Creek region well. His own property bordered it. "Miss Hastings, I hate to tell you this, but I ranch in that exact area. There's no Pritchard spread anywhere near there. The nearest neighbors I have are the Hendersons, about 8 miles east, and old Marcus Welsh to the south." The color drained from Nora's face as the implication settled over her like a cold blanket. "But that's impossible. His letters were so detailed, so specific. He knew about my teaching experience, my parents' death from fever last winter, everything." Her voice cracked slightly. "I sold what little I had left to afford the train ticket west. I have nowhere else to go." Isaac felt his chest tighten with an unfamiliar protectiveness. The situation was becoming clearer, and it made his blood boil. Some scoundrel had been playing games with this woman's life, stringing her along with false promises, while she invested her hopes and resources into a future that never existed. "Let's not jump to conclusions just yet," he said gently, though he suspected the worst. "Why don't we start by checking with the land office? They'll have records of all property owners in the area, and we can ask around town. Maybe Pritchard is newer to the area than I thought." Nora nodded, grateful for his kindness even as fear gnawed at her insides. What would she do if Edmund truly didn't exist? She had exactly $12.37 to her name, no return ticket, and no family waiting for her back east. The teaching position she had left behind had already been filled. She was stranded, completely and utterly, in a frontier town where she knew no one. The Helena land office occupied a small wooden building near the center of town, its windows dusty and its interior cramped with filing cabinets and ledgers. A thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles looked up from his desk as Isaac and Nora entered, bringing with them a gust of cold wind. "Afternoon, Isaac," the clerk said pleasantly. "What brings you to town?" "Afternoon, Harold. This is Miss Nora Hastings, just arrived from Philadelphia. She's looking for information about a property owner named Edmund Pitchard, supposed to have a ranch north of here, near Prickly Pear Creek." Harold adjusted his spectacles and stood, moving to one of the cabinets. He pulled out a thick ledger and flipped through pages with practiced efficiency. His finger traced down columns of names, then paused, went back to the beginning and searched again. Finally, he looked up with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, miss. There's no Edmund Pitchard registered as a property owner anywhere in the Helena area. Are you certain about the name?" Nora's hands shook as she produced the letters again. "It says right here, Edmund Pitchard. He wrote to me for 6 months. Why would someone do that if they didn't exist?" Harold's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm afraid you're not the first young lady to arrive here looking for a man who doesn't exist. There are unscrupulous individuals who derive some sort of pleasure from these cruel deceptions. Some do it for money, others just for the sense of power. I'm terribly sorry, miss." Isaac watched Nora's composure crumble before his eyes. She stood rigid, fighting tears, her jaw clenched with determination not to break down in front of strangers. Something protective and fierce rose in his chest. "Thank you, Harold," he said quietly, guiding Nora back outside with a gentle hand on her elbow. The afternoon sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the rutted street. Nora stood on the wooden sidewalk, staring at nothing, her entire world having collapsed in the span of an hour. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, more to herself than to Isaac. "I have no money for a return ticket, no job waiting. I left everything behind because I thought I was coming to a new life, a real home." Isaac found himself making a decision that his practical mind warned against but his heart insisted upon. The boarding house down the street is run by Mrs. Catherine Winters. She's a decent woman, fair with her rates. Let me help you get settled there for tonight at least. You can have some time to think, figure out your next step. "I can't accept charity," Nora said quickly, though the desperation in her eyes belied her words. "I won't be indebted to strangers." "It's not charity," Isaac replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "Call it neighborly assistance. Besides, Helena can always use another schoolteacher. The current one, Miss Beatrice Fowler, has been talking about retiring." "You mentioned teaching experience." A flicker of hope sparked in Nora's eyes. "I taught in Philadelphia for 2 years before my parents fell ill. English, history, and basic mathematics for children aged 6 to 14. There you go, then. That's your next step. Tomorrow we'll speak with the school board. Tonight you need rest and a decent meal. You look like you haven't eaten properly in days." The truth was, Nora hadn't. She had stretched her meager funds as far as possible during the long journey west, subsisting on bread and cheese when she remembered to eat at all. The kindness of this stranger, this Isaac Lancaster with his steady presence and genuine concern, made her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," she managed. "I don't know how I'll repay you." "Let's worry about that later," Isaac said, picking up her carpet bag despite her protests. "Right now, let's get you settled." Mrs. Catherine Winters proved to be exactly as Isaac described, a plump woman in her 50s with shrewd but kind eyes. She took one look at Nora's exhausted face and immediately bustled into action, showing her to a small but clean room on the second floor. Isaac arranged payment for 3 nights over Nora's continued protests and promised to return the next morning to accompany her to the school board meeting. That evening, Nora sat on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at the bundle of letters in her lap. Edmund Pitchard's careful script covered page after page, describing a life that never existed, asking questions about her hopes and dreams, encouraging her to leave everything behind and come west. She felt foolish and used, but more than that, she felt a burning determination not to let this defeat her. She had survived her parents' deaths, had survived the loneliness and uncertainty that followed. She would survive this too. Isaac returned to his ranch as dusk settled over the valley, but his thoughts remained in Helena with the lost young woman on the train platform. He fed his horses and the small herd of cattle he had built up over the years, completed his evening chores by lantern light, and sat in his empty cabin trying to read, but seeing only Nora's face. He couldn't explain the pull he felt, the immediate connection that had sparked when he looked into her hazel eyes. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself he preferred it that way after the hardships of his early years, but something had shifted today. Morning came cold and clear, frost glittering on the grass as Isaac rode back into Helena. He found Nora waiting on the boarding house porch, dressed in a simple gray dress that had been carefully pressed. She had braided her dark hair and pinned it in a neat crown, and despite the shadows under her eyes, she held herself with quiet dignity. "Good morning," she greeted him. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting. Mrs. Winters was kind enough to press my dress and provide breakfast." "Morning," Isaac replied, dismounting. "The school board meets at 10 o'clock. I thought we might stop by the general store first. You'll need warmer clothes if you're planning to stay in Montana. Winter comes early and hard in these parts." Nora hesitated, her pride warring with practicality. "Mr. Lancaster, I appreciate everything you've done, but I really cannot accept more help. You've already been far too generous." "Miss Hastings," Isaac said, his tone gentle but firm, "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering temporary assistance to someone in a difficult situation. If you secure the teaching position, you'll have income to repay anything you feel you owe. If you don't, we'll figure something else out. But right now, you need practical clothes, and Montana winter won't wait for pride." Something in his straightforward honesty made Nora's resistance crumble. She nodded slowly. "You're right. Thank you. I promise I'll repay every cent." The general store smelled of leather, tobacco, and coffee beans. The proprietor, a cheerful man named Samuel Chen, whose family had come from China to work the railroads before settling in Helena, showed them to the women's section. Nora selected the most modest and practical items she could find: a warm wool coat, sturdy boots, 2 everyday dresses, and a shawl. Isaac added gloves and a warmer bonnet to the pile despite her protests. "You'll need them," he said simply, and something about the way he looked at her made Nora's heart skip unexpectedly. The school board consisted of 5 members, all prominent citizens of Helena. They met in a room above the general store, and Nora climbed the stairs with her heart pounding. Isaac waited below, giving her privacy to make her own case, though his presence in the building provided comfort. The interview lasted nearly an hour. The board members questioned her thoroughly about her education, her teaching philosophy, her reasons for coming west. Nora answered honestly, including the truth about Edmund Pitchard and her current situation. She saw judgment in some faces, sympathy in others, but she held her head high and spoke with confidence about her abilities and her genuine desire to teach. Finally, the head of the board, a gray-haired banker named Thomas Morrison, leaned back in his chair. "Miss Hastings, your credentials are impressive, and your honesty about your circumstances is appreciated. However, we do have concerns about stability. What assurance do we have that you won't return east at the first opportunity?" Nora met his gaze squarely. "Mr. Morrison, I have nothing to return to. My parents are dead, my former position has been filled, and I've invested everything I had into starting a new life here. Montana may not have been the life I originally planned, but I'm committed to making it my home. I won't abandon these children or this community. You have my word." Thomas exchanged glances with the other board members. After a whispered conference, he turned back to Nora. "Miss Beatrice Fowler has agreed to stay on for 2 more weeks to help with the transition. If you're willing to start immediately and prove yourself during that time, the position is yours. The salary is $40 a month, and housing is provided in the small cottage behind the schoolhouse. It's modest but serviceable." Relief flooded through Nora so powerfully she felt dizzy. Thank you so much. I won't let you down." Isaac saw the joy on her face the moment she descended the stairs, and he found himself grinning in response. "I take it the news is good. I have a job," Nora said, her voice breathless with relief and excitement. "I start tomorrow. There's even housing included. I can't believe it. Just yesterday I thought my life was over, and now I have a real chance." "Congratulations," Isaac said warmly. "That calls for a celebration. The hotel restaurant serves decent food. Let me buy you lunch." Over plates of beef stew and fresh bread, Nora and Isaac talked for hours. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, her father's work as a clerk, her mother's skill with needlework, and the fever that had taken them both within a week of each other. She spoke of the loneliness that followed, the desperation that had made Edmund Pitchard's letters seem like a lifeline to something better. Isaac shared his own story, growing up on a failing farm in Kansas, watching his father drink away what little money they had while his mother worked herself into an early grave. He had left at 18, worked as a ranch hand for various outfits, saved every penny, and finally purchased his own land 3 years ago. He spoke of the satisfaction of building something with his own hands, the peace he found in the work and the solitude. "Don't you get lonely?" Nora asked softly. Isaac was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "I thought I preferred it. After growing up in chaos, the quiet seemed like a blessing. But lately," he paused, his blue eyes meeting hers, "lately I've been wondering if I've been confusing peace with isolation." Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of connection neither was quite ready to name. Nora looked away first, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I should see the cottage and the schoolhouse. Miss Fowler is expecting me this afternoon." The Helena schoolhouse was a simple wooden structure painted white, with a bell tower and large windows to let in natural light. Inside, rows of desks faced a blackboard, and shelves held worn textbooks and slates. Miss Beatrice Fowler was a petite woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She greeted Nora warmly and spent the afternoon showing her the curriculum, introducing her to the routines, and sharing insights about the students. The cottage behind the schoolhouse was indeed modest, consisting of a single room with a small wood stove, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and basic cooking supplies. To Nora, who had spent the past month sleeping on borrowed couches and in train stations, it looked like paradise. "It's not much," Miss Fowler said apologetically, "but it's warm and dry, and the school board keeps the woodpile stocked." "It's perfect," Nora said honestly. "It's more than I could have hoped for." Isaac helped her move her few belongings from the boarding house to the cottage that evening. As he prepared to ride back to his ranch, Nora touched his arm gently. "Mr. Lancaster, I don't know how to thank you properly. Without your help, I would have been lost." "Isaac," he corrected softly. "Please call me Isaac, and you don't need to thank me. I'm glad I was at the station yesterday." "I'm glad I could help." He hesitated, then added, "I come into town for supplies every week. If you need anything or if you just want company, please let me know." "I will," Nora promised. "And Isaac, thank you for seeing me as a person worth helping, not just a foolish woman who got herself into trouble." "You're not foolish," Isaac said firmly. "You're brave. It takes courage to leave everything behind and start over. That's not foolishness. That's strength." The words stayed with Nora long after Isaac rode away into the gathering darkness. She lay in her narrow bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier town, and for the first time since receiving Edmund Pitchard's first letter, she felt genuinely hopeful about the future. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Nora threw herself into learning the rhythms of the school, memorizing the students' names and abilities, absorbing Miss Fowler's advice and wisdom. The children ranged from 6-year-old twins who could barely read to a 14-year-old boy whose mathematical abilities exceeded Nora's own. She found joy in the work, in the challenge of reaching each child at their level and helping them grow. True to his word, Isaac came into town every week for supplies. He always stopped by the school, bringing small offerings like fresh eggs from his chickens or vegetables from his late-season garden. On Saturdays, when Nora had no teaching duties, they began taking walks together around Helena, talking about everything and nothing. Isaac showed her the town's landmarks, introduced her to shopkeepers and neighbors, helped her feel less like a stranger and more like she belonged. Nora found herself watching for Isaac's arrival each week, her heart lifting when she spotted his familiar figure. She noticed small things about him, the way he always removed his hat when speaking to women, how his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness of his hands when he helped her over rough ground. She told herself they were simply friends, that she was grateful for his kindness, but she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her chest when he was near. Isaac was fighting his own battle. Every time he saw Nora, every conversation they shared, every smile she directed his way, he fell a little harder. She had transformed from the lost woman on the train platform into a confident teacher beloved by her students. He loved watching her with the children, seeing her patience and creativity. He loved her quick mind and sharp humor, the way she asked thoughtful questions about ranching and listened with genuine interest to his answers. Winter arrived in full force in late November, bringing snow that transformed Helena into a white wonderland. The school remained open despite the cold, with Isaac and other local men taking turns ensuring the wood stove stayed lit, and the path to the schoolhouse door remained clear. Nora marveled at the community spirit, the way neighbors looked after each other in this harsh but beautiful land. One Saturday in early December, Isaac invited Nora to visit his ranch. "It's about a 2-hour ride," he explained. "I'll bring a gentle horse for you. I thought you might like to see what life is really like out here, beyond the town limits." Nora agreed eagerly, and the next Saturday dawned clear and cold. Bundled in her warm coat and the gloves Isaac had insisted on buying, she mounted the docile mare Isaac provided and followed him out of Helena. The landscape was breathtaking, rolling hills covered in snow, stands of pine trees dark against the white ground, and a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Isaac's ranch consisted of a sturdy log cabin, a small barn, a corral, and several outbuildings. It wasn't large or fancy, but everything was well maintained and functional. Isaac showed her around with obvious pride, introducing her to his horses, his cattle, and even a barn cat that had adopted him the previous spring. Inside the cabin, a fire crackled in the stone fireplace, filling the single large room with warmth. The space was sparse but clean, with a bed in one corner, a kitchen area, a table and chairs, and shelves holding books and a few personal items. What struck Nora most was the loneliness of it all. Everything was built for one person, arranged for solitary life, and she suddenly understood what Isaac had meant about confusing peace with isolation. "It's lovely," she said softly. "You've built something real here, something lasting." "I'd like it to be more," Isaac admitted, his voice quiet. "A real home, not just a place to sleep between work, but that requires something I don't have." "What's that?" Nora asked, though her heart already knew the answer. "Someone to share it with," Isaac replied, turning to face her. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the vulnerability in his expression. "Nora, I know we haven't known each other long. 3 months isn't much time in the grand scheme of things, but these have been the best 3 months of my life. I find myself working faster just so I can ride into town on Saturdays. I lie awake at night thinking about conversations we've had, things I want to tell you or show you. I've never felt this way about anyone, and I need you to know that before another day passes." Nora's heart raced. She had known her own feelings had deepened from friendship into something more profound, but hearing Isaac voice the same sentiment made it suddenly real and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "Isaac, I feel the same way. You've been more than kind to me. You've been my true direction when I was completely lost. You saw me not as a burden or a problem to solve, but as a person worth knowing. I look forward to Saturdays all week. I find myself wanting to share everything with you, every small moment of my day, but I'm afraid." "Of what?" Isaac asked gently, moving closer. "Of being foolish again," Nora admitted. "Of trusting too quickly, of mistaking gratitude for something deeper. I thought Edmund Pitchard's letters meant something real, and I was so wrong. How do I know this is real?" Isaac reached out and took her hands in his calloused palms warm against her skin. "I can't promise to be perfect. I'm just a rancher with a small spread and big dreams, but I can promise to be real with you always. What I feel isn't gratitude or obligation. It's something I've never experienced before, something that makes me want to be better than I am. You challenge me and comfort me. You make me laugh and think and hope. That's not gratitude. That's love." The word hung between them, precious and terrifying. Nora looked into Isaac's blue eyes and saw truth there, vulnerability and strength in equal measure. She thought about the past 3 months, how Isaac had never pushed or pressured, had simply been present and supportive while she found her footing. She thought about his kindness to her students, his respect for her independence, his willingness to share both his joy and his loneliness. "I love you too," she whispered, and saying it out loud made it more real than anything she had ever known. "I think I started falling for you that first day on the train platform, though I didn't recognize it then. You were the answer to prayers I hadn't even known to pray." Isaac pulled her close, and when his lips met hers it was gentle and reverent, a promise more than a claim. Nora melted into the kiss, her arms wrapping around his neck as his hands settled at her waist. Time seemed to stop, the crackle of the fire and the whisper of wind outside fading into insignificance. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Nora. Not because you need security or because I'm lonely, but because we fit. Because I want to wake up next to you every morning and share this life I'm building. Because I want to support your teaching and your dreams while you support mine. Marry me because we're better together than we ever could be apart." Tears streamed down Nora's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. I want all of that. I want to build a life with you, a real partnership. I want to transform your cabin into our home. Yes." They spent the rest of the day making plans, talking about the future with an excitement that made them both feel young and invincible. Isaac wanted to wait until spring for the wedding, to give Nora time to finish her first full school term and prove herself to any remaining doubters in the community. Nora agreed, seeing the wisdom in establishing her own reputation independent of her marriage. News of their engagement spread through Helena quickly, met with almost universal approval. The townspeople had watched Isaac's devotion over the past months, had seen Nora's transformation from lost stranger to valued community member. Mrs. Winters, the boarding house owner, declared she had known from the first day they were meant for each other. Samuel Chen at the general store offered them a discount on household goods as a wedding present. Even the stern Mr. Morrison from the school board congratulated Nora, pleased that she was putting down such permanent roots. Winter deepened, and Nora continued teaching while Isaac maintained his ranch. They saw each other every weekend, sometimes at the cabin, sometimes in town, always chaperoned appropriately to preserve Nora's reputation. They talked about expanding the ranch, perhaps buying neighboring land when it became available. They discussed Nora continuing to teach after marriage, a somewhat unconventional choice but one Isaac supported fully. "Your teaching is part of who you are," he told her firmly when she voiced concern about community opinions. "I won't ask you to give up something so important. We'll figure out the logistics together." Christmas came, and Isaac gave Nora a beautiful hand-carved music box he had commissioned from a woodworker in town. When opened, it played a gentle melody while a tiny carved horse and rider circled inside. "To remind you of that first day," Isaac explained, "when you stepped off the train and changed my life forever." Nora's gift to Isaac was more practical but no less thoughtful, a warm coat she had saved for, and a thick wool scarf she had knitted herself during long winter evenings. "So you'll stay warm on those long rides between the ranch and town," she said. "So I don't have to worry about you." They spent Christmas Day with Miss Fowler and several other townspeople who had no family nearby, creating a makeshift family celebration full of food, laughter, and warmth. Nora watched Isaac playing checkers with one of her students, saw him listening patiently to Miss Fowler's stories about teaching in frontier towns for 4 decades, and her heart swelled with love and certainty. This was right. This was home. January and February passed in a blur of cold and snow. Nora's teaching reputation grew as parents saw their children's progress. The school board made her appointment permanent, removing the trial status and increasing her salary slightly. She saved every penny she could, determined to contribute financially to her marriage and future household. Isaac used the winter months to plan improvements to the cabin. He sketched additions in the evenings by firelight, dreaming of adding a separate bedroom, expanding the kitchen area, perhaps eventually building a second story. He saved too, selling cattle to a buyer who came through despite the snow, banking the money against spring expenses and wedding costs. In early March, as the snow began to melt and the first hints of green appeared on the hillsides, tragedy struck. Nora received a letter forwarded from Philadelphia. It was from a lawyer, informing her that a distant aunt she barely remembered had passed away and left Nora a modest inheritance, approximately $300. The money would help tremendously with wedding expenses and ranch improvements, but the letter brought unexpected grief. The aunt, her father's older sister, had been estranged from the family for years due to some long-ago disagreement Nora had never fully understood. Now she was gone, and Nora mourned both the death and the relationship that never had the chance to heal. Isaac held her while she cried, understanding that grief was never simple or predictable. "Tell me about her," he encouraged. "What do you remember?" "Almost nothing," Nora admitted. "I met her once when I was very small. She gave me peppermints and told my father he was too strict with me. They argued, and I never saw her again. I used to wonder about her, especially after my parents died. I thought about trying to find her, but I didn't know where to start. And now it's too late. You can honor her memory by accepting this gift she's giving you," Isaac suggested gently. "She clearly thought of you, even if circumstances kept you apart. Use this money to build the life she would have wanted for you." The wisdom and compassion in his words helped ease Nora's grief. She decided to use part of the inheritance to commission a permanent headstone for her parents' graves in Philadelphia and to donate to the school library in her aunt's name. The rest would indeed go toward their future together. As March turned to April, wedding preparations began in earnest. They set the date for the last Saturday in April, giving the weather time to fully clear and allowing enough notice for Isaac's scattered friends and acquaintances to attend. The ceremony would be held in the small church in Helena, with a reception following in the town hall. Nora sewed her own wedding dress during evening hours, creating a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored silk she purchased from Samuel Chen. Mrs. Winters insisted on helping with the reception food, recruiting other townswomen to contribute dishes. Miss Fowler, who had retired at the end of February but remained in Helena, offered to play the church's piano during the ceremony. Isaac, meanwhile, worked frantically to complete the cabin renovations he had planned. With help from his neighbors, the Hendersons and Marcus Welsh, he added a proper bedroom, expanded the kitchen, and built a covered porch across the front of the cabin. He purchased a larger bed, a dresser, and other furnishings that would make the space comfortable for two. 1 week before the wedding, Nora and Isaac met at the cabin for a final review of arrangements. Standing on the new porch, looking out over the greening hills, Nora felt profound contentment settle over her. A year ago, I was mourning my parents and wondering if I would ever feel happy again. 6 months ago, I was desperate enough to answer a stranger's advertisement and travel across the country on faith alone. And now I'm standing here, about to marry a man I love more than I knew was possible, in a place that feels more like home than anywhere I've ever lived. Life is strange and wonderful. Isaac wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. Edmund Pitchard did you a favor in a twisted way. If he had been real, you would have married him and never known us. His lie led you to the truth. The truth, Nora mused. That's a good way to describe it. You are my truth, Isaac, the real thing after so much uncertainty. And you're my direction, Isaac replied softly. I was just going through motions, existing but not really living. You gave me purpose beyond daily survival. You made me want more, dream bigger, hope harder. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, a lone wolf howled and cattle lowed their evening songs. The wind carried the scent of pine and new grass. It was a perfect moment, a preview of the thousands of such moments they would share in the years to come. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, a perfect April morning with birds singing and flowers beginning to bloom. Nora dressed in her cottage with Mrs. Winter's assistance, her hands surprisingly steady as she fastened the small pearl buttons running up the back of her gown. She had woven wildflowers into her dark hair, creating a crown of white and yellow blossoms that looked both elegant and natural. At the church, Isaac waited with Marcus Welsh, who had agreed to stand as his best man despite barely knowing him. The older rancher had been gruffly delighted by the invitation, claiming Isaac reminded him of his younger self. The pews filled with townspeople, students and their families, members of the school board, shopkeepers, and neighbors. For two people who had arrived in Helena as strangers, they had built an impressive community. When Nora appeared in the doorway, Isaac's breath caught. She looked radiant, her hazel eyes shining with joy, her smile soft and genuine. She walked down the aisle alone, having no one to give her away, but her head was high and her steps confident. She was giving herself to Isaac freely and completely, her own choice made with open eyes and full heart. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. The pastor, Reverend Michael Thompson, spoke briefly about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of partnership, especially in the demanding frontier life. Then Isaac and Nora exchanged vows they had written themselves. "Nora," Isaac began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams while sharing my own, to offer you respect, honesty, and love every day for the rest of my life." You stepped off a train looking for direction, and instead you gave me mine. You showed me that being alone and being at peace are not the same thing. I promise to work every day to deserve the gift of your love. Tears slipped down Nora's cheeks as she spoke her own vows. Isaac, I promise to stand beside you through all seasons, both literal and metaphorical, to share in the work and the joy of building our life together, to honor the trust you placed in me when I was at my most vulnerable. You saw me when I felt invisible, valued me when I felt worthless. I promise to reflect that back to you, to remind you of your own worth and goodness, and to love you with everything I am. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac pulled Nora close and kissed her thoroughly, drawing cheers and applause from the gathered crowd. Hand in hand, they walked back down the aisle into the Montana sunshine, beginning their married life surrounded by community and blessing. The reception was a lively affair with food, music, and dancing. Isaac surprised everyone by being a decent dancer, spinning Nora around the floor while her laughter rang out like music. They cut a simple cake Mrs. Winters had baked and decorated with sugar flowers, fed each other bites while their guests clapped and whistled. As the afternoon faded into evening, Isaac and Nora slipped away from the celebration. They rode toward the ranch in comfortable silence, both aware that their life together was truly beginning. At the cabin, Isaac lifted Nora from her horse and carried her across the threshold, a traditional gesture that made her laugh and blush simultaneously. Inside, the fire burned low in the hearth, and candles Isaac had lit earlier cast a warm glow over the space. It looked different than before, more complete, as though it had been waiting for Nora to arrive and make it whole. Isaac set her gently on her feet, his hands lingering at her waist. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. "A little," Nora admitted, "but more excited than nervous. I trust you, Isaac." Completely. They came together with tenderness and growing passion, learning each other's rhythms, discovering what gave pleasure and comfort. Isaac was gentle but not hesitant, attentive to Nora's responses, ensuring her comfort and joy. Nora found courage she hadn't known she possessed, responding with equal honesty and desire. Their joining was both physical and spiritual, a completion of the bond they had been building since that first day on the train platform. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the large bed, listening to the night sounds outside. Nora traced patterns on Isaac's chest, marveling at how natural this felt, how right. "Is it always like this?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Isaac replied honestly. "I've never felt this complete before. I think when two people truly love each other, when they've built the kind of foundation we have, the physical expression is richer. At least, that's how it feels to me." "To me too," Nora agreed, snuggling closer. "I feel safe and cherished and wanted, all at once." They talked late into the night, making plans and sharing dreams. Isaac wanted to expand the herd, perhaps diversify into horses as well as cattle. Nora wanted to implement new teaching methods she had read about, maybe start an adult literacy program for those who had never had the chance to learn. They discussed children, both agreeing they wanted a family but not rushing into it. They wanted time to enjoy being just the two of them, to solidify their partnership before adding the complexity and joy of children. Spring melted into summer, and Nora settled into a new rhythm. During the week, she lived at the cottage and taught school. Isaac came to town most evenings, sharing dinner with her before riding back to the ranch for nighttime chores. On Fridays after school, Nora would ride out to the ranch, spending the weekends helping with whatever needed doing, learning the intricacies of frontier ranching life, and enjoying uninterrupted time with her husband. To Nora's surprise, she loved ranch life. She learned to milk cows, tend chickens, maintain the vegetable garden Isaac had expanded. She proved to be an excellent shot with a rifle, quickly becoming proficient at hunting small game for the dinner pot. Isaac taught her to ride better, and together they explored the surrounding countryside, discovering hidden valleys and clear streams. In town, Nora's reputation continued to grow. The adult literacy program she started drew a dozen participants, men and women who worked during the day but came to the schoolhouse 2 evenings a week to learn their letters. She was tireless in her commitment, creative in her methods, patient with frustration. The school board praised her initiative, and several parents commented on how their children's confidence had improved under her tutelage. Summer heat gave way to autumn's crisp air, and the landscape transformed into a tapestry of gold, orange, and red. Isaac brought in a good hay harvest, stored supplies for winter, and sold cattle at better prices than the previous year. He used part of the profits to buy Nora a piano, hiring a freight company to transport the precious instrument from Helena to the ranch. When it arrived, Nora cried with joy and threw her arms around Isaac's neck. "How did you know?" she asked. "I never said anything about missing music." "I saw how you looked when Miss Fowler played at the wedding," Isaac explained. "And you mentioned once that your mother used to play. I wanted you to have that joy here." The piano transformed the cabin's atmosphere. Nora would play in the evenings, filling the space with melodies ranging from classical pieces to folk songs. Isaac loved watching her fingers dance across the keys, seeing the peace that settled over her features when she played. Sometimes he sang along in his rough but earnest voice, making her laugh and kiss him between verses. In October, Nora realized she was pregnant. The discovery brought mixed emotions. Joy, certainly, and excitement about expanding their family. But also fear about how pregnancy would affect her teaching, worry about the dangers of childbirth in a frontier environment where medical care was limited. She delayed telling Isaac for a week, wanting to sort through her feelings first. When she finally shared the news over Sunday breakfast, Isaac's face cycled through surprise, delight, and concern. "Are you happy about this?" he asked carefully. "I know we talked about waiting." "I'm happy," Nora said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "Surprised because we haven't been careless, but happy. I'm also scared, which I suppose is normal. We'll face it together," Isaac promised. "Whatever you need, whatever will help you feel safe and prepared. We have months to get ready, to arrange everything so you can keep teaching as long as you want and have help after the baby comes." They told the school board in November, making it clear that Nora intended to continue teaching until late spring. The board agreed to find a temporary replacement for the end of the school year, but assured Nora her position would be waiting when she was ready to return. Several women in town offered advice and assistance, sharing their own childbirth experiences and promising to be available when Nora's time came. Winter arrived again, Nora's second in Montana. She taught until the end of March, her growing belly making some tasks more challenging but not impossible. The students were excited about the upcoming baby, drawing pictures and writing stories about what they thought the baby would be like. Nora collected all of them in a special book, touched by their innocent enthusiasm. In early April, Nora moved to the ranch full-time to prepare for the birth. Mrs. Winters and two other experienced women from town, both of whom had served as midwives, came to stay at the ranch as Nora's due date approached. Isaac was grateful for their presence, his own nervousness increasing as the time drew near. The baby, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, arrived on a warm evening in late April, almost exactly 1 year after Isaac and Nora's wedding. The labor was long but uncomplicated, and when Isaac was finally allowed into the bedroom, he found Nora exhausted but radiant, cradling their son against her chest. "Meet your son," Nora said softly. "I was thinking we could name him Matthew after my father." Isaac knelt beside the bed, his large hand gently stroking the baby's tiny head. "Matthew Lancaster, it's perfect." He looked up at Nora with wonder in his eyes. "You're amazing. He's amazing. I don't have words for what I'm feeling right now." "Neither do I," Nora admitted. "But it's something like overwhelming love mixed with terror that we're responsible for this tiny person." They laughed together, the kind of slightly hysterical laughter that comes with exhaustion and enormous life changes. The midwives bustled around, cleaning up and ensuring mother and baby were both comfortable and healthy. They promised to check back the next day before returning to town, leaving the new family to bond in privacy. Those first weeks were simultaneously the hardest and most beautiful of their lives. Matthew was a good baby, healthy and reasonably content, but the sleep deprivation and constant demands were challenging. Isaac took over all ranch duties, hiring a young man from town to help with the heavier work so he could stay closer to the house and assist Nora when needed. Nora recovered well from the birth, her strength returning quickly. She marveled at motherhood, at the fierce protectiveness she felt, at the way her heart seemed to expand to encompass this new love without diminishing what she felt for Isaac. If anything, watching Isaac with Matthew, seeing his gentleness and patience with their son, made her love him even more deeply. By summer, they had established a routine that worked for their family. Nora had decided not to return to full-time teaching the following school year, instead offering to tutor students privately at the ranch. Several families took her up on the offer, appreciating the individualized attention their children received. It allowed Nora to continue doing work she loved while being present for Matthew's early months. Isaac's ranch continued to prosper. He purchased additional land from Marcus Welsh, who decided to downsize as he aged. The expansion allowed Isaac to increase his herd and try his hand at horse breeding, a venture that showed early promise. Money was still sometimes tight, but they were building something substantial, creating generational wealth and stability. Matthew grew from infant to toddler, a curious and active child who loved animals and wide open spaces. By his second birthday, he could sit a horse in front of his father, squealing with delight as they rode around the property. He helped feed chickens, scattering grain with chubby hands while Nora watched fondly from the porch. In the fall of Matthew's second year, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, only quiet joy. They had proven they could handle parenthood, had built systems and support that worked. The second baby, a girl they named Sarah, arrived the following spring without complications. She was smaller than Matthew had been, with hazel eyes like her mother and a calm temperament that contrasted with her brother's endless energy. The years that followed established a pattern of fullness and purpose. Isaac's ranch became one of the most successful in the region, his reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing spreading widely. Nora's private tutoring grew into a small but respected enterprise, with students coming from as far as 20 miles away for her instruction. She also wrote educational materials that were published in territorial newspapers, sharing her teaching methods with others. Matthew and Sarah grew strong and happy, roaming the ranch with the freedom that only frontier childhood could provide. They learned to ride, to shoot, to work hard and find joy in simple things. Nora taught them to read before they were 5, instilling a love of learning and curiosity about the world beyond Montana. Isaac taught them ranch skills and self-reliance, but also gentleness and respect for all living things. When Montana achieved statehood in 1889, the Lancaster family attended the celebrations in Helena. Walking through the streets of the town where their story had begun, Nora and Isaac reflected on the decade that had passed since that day at the train station. "You ever think about Edmund Pitchard?" Isaac asked as they watched fireworks light up the night sky. "Sometimes," Nora admitted. "But not with anger anymore. His deception hurt terribly at the time, but it brought me here to you, to this life. I can't regret that, even if the path was painful." "I think about how easily we might have missed each other," Isaac said, "if I had come to town a day earlier or later. If I hadn't noticed you on the platform, if you had found someone else to help you or given up and gone back east, so many ways our story could have never happened. But it did happen, Nora said, squeezing his hand. "We found each other at exactly the right moment. You became my direction when I was completely lost, and I'd like to think I became yours too." "You did," Isaac confirmed, pulling her close. "Every single day you show me where I'm supposed to be and who I'm supposed to be. Home isn't a place. It's you and the kids, the life we've built together." As the years continued to pass, the Lancaster Ranch became a landmark in the region. Isaac's horse breeding program gained recognition, with buyers coming from across Montana and even from neighboring states. Nora published a book about frontier education that was adopted by several school districts. Matthew showed an aptitude for veterinary medicine and began apprenticing with the town's animal doctor. Sarah, quieter than her brother but equally determined, demonstrated artistic talent, her drawings and paintings capturing the beauty of Montana landscape. In 1895, when Matthew was 18 and Sarah 16, Nora and Isaac sat on their porch watching the sunset, much as they had done countless times over the years. They were both in their 40s now, gray threading through Nora's dark hair, lines etching deeper around Isaac's eyes. But the connection between them remained as strong as ever, perhaps stronger for having weathered decades of life together. "You remember what you said to me in the land office that first day?" Nora asked. "About getting me settled at the boarding house so I could figure out my next step." Isaac smiled. "I remember. I was so nervous trying to help without overstepping. I wanted you to feel safe, not pressured." "I was terrified," Nora admitted. "Not of you, but of my situation. I felt like such a fool for being taken in by Edmund's letters, but you never made me feel foolish. You saw past my circumstances to the person underneath." "I saw a brave woman who deserved better than she had been given," Isaac said. "I saw someone worth knowing, worth helping, and then I saw someone worth loving. You saved me, Isaac." "No," Isaac countered gently. "We saved each other. I was just existing before you arrived, going through motions. You gave me purpose and joy. You turned my house into a home, my solitude into partnership. We saved each other." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands as the sky turned from blue to orange to purple. In the distance, they could hear Matthew working with a young horse and Sarah singing as she walked back from the creek. The sounds of their life together, the life they had built from nothing but hope and hard work and love. As full darkness fell and stars began to emerge, Isaac helped Nora to her feet. They walked inside together, into the cabin that had expanded over the years to become a true home, filled with warmth and memories and love. The piano Nora had received so many years ago sat in the corner, still played regularly. Photographs lined the mantel above the fireplace, capturing moments from their life together. Nora moved to the piano and began to play, a soft melody she had learned from her mother decades ago. Isaac sat nearby, listening, his heart full of gratitude for the unexpected gift of this life. A woman stepping off a train, looking lost. A lonely cowboy becoming her direction. From that chance meeting had grown a love story that spanned decades, a family that would carry their legacy forward, a home built on foundation of trust and respect and genuine partnership. When Nora finished playing, she turned to Isaac with a smile. "I love you," she said simply. "Thank you for seeing me all those years ago. Thank you for helping me find my way." "Thank you for letting me," Isaac replied, crossing to her and pulling her into his arms. "Thank you for choosing to stay, for building this life with me. You are still the best thing that ever happened to me." They held each other in the lamplight, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. A love born from hardship and chance, nurtured through years of work and dedication, blooming into something that would endure long after they were gone. Outside, the Montana night stretched vast and star-filled above the ranch, above the land they had tamed together, above the home where two lost souls had found each other and built something beautiful. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows to come, each one a gift made sweeter by sharing it with someone who truly understood what it meant to be found when you thought you were lost forever. Matthew eventually took over the ranch operation as Isaac's strength began to wane with age. He married a local woman named Clara, and they gave Nora and Isaac 4 grandchildren who filled the ranch house with noise and laughter. Sarah moved to Helena after marrying the town doctor's son, but she visited frequently, bringing her own children to run through the fields where she had played as a girl. Nora continued tutoring until she was well into her 60s, finally retiring when her eyesight began to fail. Even then, she remained involved in educational initiatives, advocating for improved schools and teacher training throughout Montana. Her book went through multiple editions, and she was recognized as a pioneer in frontier education, though she always insisted her greatest achievement was her family. Isaac ranched until he could no longer sit a horse, then supervised from the porch, offering advice and wisdom earned through decades of experience. He took pride in watching Matthew expand what he had started, seeing the ranch grow beyond anything he had originally imagined. But his greatest joy remained Nora, his partner through it all, the woman who had transformed his life simply by stepping off a train. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 1929, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house Isaac had built with his own hands decades earlier had been expanded and improved, but the core remained, a testament to humble beginnings. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren ran through the rooms, their laughter echoing off walls that had witnessed 50 years of love and life. During the celebration, Matthew asked his parents to share the story of how they met. It was a tale the family had heard countless times, but they never tired of it. Isaac and Nora sat together in matching rocking chairs, his weathered hand clasping hers as they recounted that April day in 1878. "Your mother stepped off that train looking completely lost," Isaac began, his voice still strong despite his 83 years. "I was across the street loading supplies, and something made me look up at just the right moment." "I was terrified," Nora added, her eyes still bright despite her 70 years. "I had traveled so far based on lies, and suddenly I was stranded with almost no money and nowhere to go. Then this kind stranger approached and offered to help, asking nothing in return. I knew the moment I saw her," Isaac said. "Something told me she was important, that helping her was the most important thing I would ever do, and I was right." "He saved me," Nora said softly, "not just practically, by helping me find work and a place to live. But he saved me from despair, from giving up. He reminded me that I had value and purpose. He became my true direction when I had none." "She saved me right back," Isaac countered. "I was so lonely, though I didn't recognize it then. I had convinced myself that isolation was the same as peace. She showed me what partnership could be, what love could be. She made me whole." Their children and grandchildren listened with tears in their eyes, moved not just by the story itself, but by the visible love that still existed between the elderly couple. 50 years together, and they still looked at each other with tenderness and devotion. 50 years of life's joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges, and they had weathered it all together, emerging stronger for the shared experience. As evening fell and the celebration wound down, families began the journey back to their own homes. Matthew and Clara had built a house on the ranch property, so they stayed behind with Isaac and Nora. After everyone else had left, after the house was quiet, Nora and Isaac sat together on their porch one more time. 50 years, Nora mused. It's gone so quickly, yet we've fit so much life into it. Sometimes I can hardly believe I'm the same frightened girl who stepped off that train. You're not, Isaac said. You're stronger, wiser, more amazing than you were then, though you were pretty amazing from the start. We've had a good life, haven't we? Nora asked, though she knew the answer. We built something that will last beyond us. The ranch, the family, the community we've contributed to. We mattered. We did, Isaac agreed. We do. But even if none of that existed, even if it was just the two of us in that little cabin, it would have been enough. You have always been enough, Nora. You are the measure of my success, the standard by which I judge everything else. Loving you and being loved by you is the greatest achievement of my life. Nora leaned her head on Isaac's shoulder, fitting against him as naturally as she had for 50 years. I love you, Isaac Lancaster. Thank you for being at that train station. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for this beautiful life. Thank you for staying, Isaac replied, kissing the top of her head. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me. I would do it all again in a heartbeat, every moment, every challenge, every joy. They sat together as stars emerged overhead, holding hands and remembering. A mail-order bride who stepped off a train looking lost. A lonely cowboy who became her true direction. From that chance meeting had grown a love that spanned 50 years and counting. A family that would carry their legacy forward. A story that would be told to great-great-grandchildren not yet born. They had found each other when both needed finding most, and together they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something true. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later at 85. Nora held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering words of love and gratitude for the life they had shared. She mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been blessed with 52 years together, more than many couples received. She had loved and been loved completely, had built a life of meaning and purpose, had raised children who were good people, and created a family that would endure. Nora lived 3 more years after Isaac's death, spending her final days surrounded by the family they had created together. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, telling stories, offering wisdom, making sure everyone knew how much they were loved. When she finally joined Isaac in the spring of 1934, at 74 years old, it felt less like an ending and more like a completion. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery outside Helena, their graves overlooking the town where their story had begun. The headstone was simple but meaningful, with their names, dates, and a single line that captured everything important. Together they found home. The ranch remained in the Lancaster family, passed down through generations. Matthew's children took it over, then their children, each generation adding their own improvements while honoring the foundation Isaac and Nora had built. The house was eventually added to Montana's historical registry, recognized as an example of late 19th century frontier architecture, and a landmark of the region's settlement history. But more than buildings or land, Isaac and Nora's true legacy was the love they had shared and the example they had set. Their story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. A reminder that sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as disasters. That kindness to strangers can change everything. That real love is built on foundation of respect, partnership, and genuine caring for another person's well-being. That home is not a place, but the people you share your life with. A mail-order bride stepped off a train looking lost. A lonely cowboy became her true direction. And from that moment of connection, from that choice to help and to stay and to love, came generations of family, decades of happiness, and a story that would endure long after the last witness had passed away. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, filled with hardship and triumph, challenge and joy, all of it made meaningful by two people who chose each other and kept choosing each other every single day for more than 50 years. Their love had been real and lasting, the kind that transforms not just the lovers but everyone around them. The kind that reminds us all why we keep believing in happy endings, why we keep hoping for our own chance encounters that change everything. Isaac and Nora Lancaster had found each other against all odds, had built something beautiful from nothing but determination and devotion, and had proven that sometimes, even in the hardest of circumstances, love really does conquer all.